Has anything changed? Does anybody want to update me on what the obsession with the Board of Commissioners is with this piece of property?
Some of the Board of Commissioners.
Any of you. I would take an answer from anyone at this point. I mean, I think I've asked this question over the last, 2-3 months, probably 30 times, and I have yet to get an answer.
That is not accurate. I will give you the same answer that I have given repeatedly. I have here a letter dated March 28th, 2001. And this is, as I have gone through and looked at the historical record, this is a reflection. And here, I will read the letter in its entirety, and then I will bring back to the comment, which was, we are interested in not putting additional burdens on the taxpayer and making the fairgrounds more self-sufficient. So here is a letter dated March 28, 2001 to Becky Witt from Sharon Bryant, the fairgrounds manager. I know neither of these ladies. Becky, can you please schedule the commissioners to come out to the fairgrounds to go over some of the budgetary problems and management problems I have been encountering ever since I took over the management of the fairgrounds. Specifically, I need to go over the way my budget is set up and the expenses I pay for others, which are not reimbursed. The previous commissioners told me they want to become self-supporting, and I need to know how they want me to achieve that. So 22 years ago, the goal of the fairgrounds manager and a previous Board of County Commissioners was to move the Bonner County Fairgrounds towards being more financially self-sufficient. The reasons why I was opposed in the last motion was because it is an additional tax burden. I am not interested in growing government in that fashion. As someone who has camped in that area, and as someone who is very aware, and I have received letters from a number of fair and 4-H families advocating for this project because that is where they camp. And I went to that event. I was not in a black dress on Saturday, but as I drove in my super sweet minivan, I almost got to spend some money at a local auto body shop because the potholes in the parking lot are so massive. At the last Fair Board meeting, they had a gentleman who was appalled at the condition of the road, and he made a very generous offer, and I'm not speaking for the Fair Board, to assist with improving that by providing a personal donation or his company's donation. The fairgrounds needs revenue, and this is a means to build revenue, but also to improve uses that have been in place for decades without putting my hand out to the taxpayer.
First of all, I completely support the fairgrounds and being able to support itself. And I don't know if all the fairgrounds across Idaho and the rest of the country support themselves by having RV parks that are in competition with private RV parks, but I suspect that there's quite a few fairgrounds across this nation and in this state who don't have RV parks and are able to be financially stable, being able to keep the fairgrounds in the black. Second of all, that's great, but it still doesn't address the issue that the commissioners have tried multiple different ways to take this specific piece of property. It's not that you're having a fairground or that you're having an RV park. I don't care they're having an RV park as much as I care about exactly where you insist on that RV park going. You have over and over and over again found a way to go back to that exact same piece of property, be it the ice rink or this RV park thing. Even when the Fair Board wanted to put it someplace else on the fairgrounds, you helped change the Fair Board so that maybe now they're agreeing with you. I'm not sure if they're agreeing with you guys or not. But this is not a mystery, Luke. I mean, this has been going on. You guys have yet to explain why that one particular chunk of property is so vital to your needs.
I would like to make a comment on the letter that the commissioner read, because there's something distinctly different in that letter versus what members of this current board are doing. What you heard was someone who was working for the fair inviting the commissioners to the table to have a discussion about what the goal was versus the commissioners telling what the plan is to the fair. And that is critical to point out that difference, because it is the right of the fair to create their own plan, which includes the RV campground. So the question is not anything to do with taxes. It has nothing to do with the independence of the fairground. It's the imposition of the desire of the board toward the fairground when the fairground hasn't actually asked for us to do any of this. And that bears pointing out, because that's what the letter said. Invite the commissioners to the fair to have this discussion so that the fair could develop their plan. And that is, this continues to be frustrating because there is no representation of the fair. We've heard the commissioners who are voting for this consistently say that we're going to have this discussion with the fair board, yet that has not actually occurred. There just seems to be another memorandum of understanding or a change in an agreement, or in this case, removing a memorandum of understanding to say that now you can only use that current parking spot for an RV campground, which is not the vision of the fairground, while we spend up to $25,000 based on a decision of the board. This is a problematic process, and if we learn anything from that letter, it should be that this board should be talking to the fairground, not just creating its own decision, because the fairground does not have to follow through with this.
And how insolvent is the fairgrounds? I mean, are they losing money every year? You don't even know, or?
They don't have the money to be able to fund this project. And there were some
I'm not asking about that. I'm saying, is the budget of the fairgrounds negative every year? Is the county having to fund the fairgrounds every year?
The county does put money in. And in 1927, now there were some interesting misrepresentations of history there, which I have come to expect. But in 1927, when Bonner County originally started the Bonner County Fair, it was Bonner County who subsidized it, which is why it is Bonner County real owned property. This property is owned and by statute controlled by Bonner County. That is real owned property, that's statute. There was not even a fair board until 1930. Bonner County purchased the ground, the dirt where the current fairgrounds sits on in 1960. And after that took place, the city, yet once again, we have to follow law. The city did not allow the continuance of the fairgrounds over at where the museum currently sits. And that what happened is it hastened the move from what is Lakeview Park of the fairgrounds, where there used to be a ton of old buildings, but that was before my time, to where it is now. And the county has historically subsidized it because it is state statute for us to subsidize the fair. So they are nested together. The county created the fairgrounds and the fair board came later.
Can I ask you, what does the county give the fair? Because I don't believe that has actually ever changed.
Right, and I'm just curious here. I mean, how much are we spending on the fair? How much are they losing every year that this RV park is supposed to make up? And is the money that we're going to gain from this RV park, in theory, going to make it up? And still, back to the base question, why right there? Why is this one particular chunk of property so vital to this? I still haven't heard the answer, and we're talking months here. We've been getting the same question over and over again. Why that piece of property? Not a history lesson, not about your family, not about where you camp. Why that piece of property? I think it's a simple question that you've avoided answering for months.
Thank you.
I think what comes out over and over is that it's unfortunate, because what I hear when I hear the explanation is always the county commissioners get to make the decision. The county commissioners are in charge of the county land, but it doesn't answer the question. And to be honest, the county, if you recognize the need for the RV campground, because it would be beneficial for them to have a campground, but at what expense? But we're also risking even receiving the grant. And my argument remains the same over, this is encumbered land. If we need to use it for an expansion of the Justice Department, which is greater than just the sheriff's office, it includes the courts, then if we pull out of this RV campground on this location, we are subject to being obligated to pay all or part of it back. And so if we want to use the argument of not having a burden on the taxpayers, where will the almost $500,000 come from? It will take services away from Bonner County, and it will be, in my opinion, inappropriate to tell the state we would like a grant for something that we may potentially have to bulldoze because we are choosing the location because we can versus making an objective assessment of where we could put that. I have not heard anything other than we get to make the decision, and that isn't enough to risk paying back $500,000.
Well, I would encourage all three commissioners to do the whole county a favor and let us in on this big secret that you guys all obviously know about, that is the best place in the whole county that we could put that RV park. Even though the Fairgrounds Board, the previous Fairgrounds Board, didn't want it there, but you guys did. I mean, apparently it was obvious. It was also like the perfect place in the entire county for an ice rink until that was, squashed by the AG, and then now it's a perfect place for an RV park. The exact same piece of property. So if you guys want to tell us what the secret mystery is at that piece of property, why it's so ideal for you guys to use for something, I'm all ears, man. I mean, I've asked you guys how many times?
I will correct and say I've always voted no, so you're asking the other two.
Right. But I wonder what they're keeping from you and why, as county commissioners, you guys aren't privy all to the same information. I mean, there's something wrong here. It's obviously wrong. And I love the stares back like, oh, we got nothing to say. We don't know nothing.
You're up.
Sheriff Wheeler.
Sheriff Darrell Wheeler for the record. Just wanted to give, I guess, a little bit of historical perspective, and also maybe I just want to ask a few questions, because I know that before I came into office, there were intention of building a 60-bed facility in front of the sheriff's office and a new juvenile detention facility. That was squashed because it didn't go to the voters, and so more plans were made throughout that time. 2006, there was a study made, and there was a lot of communications between all the elected officials on where we should build property. I have maps from 2006 study showing that location where the proposed RV park is, where there's a building there for proposed building. So there's been this communication, and I can tell you, I was in office as sheriff in 2014, and I remember when Mike Nielsen brought this proposal, and he acknowledged collaboration between the sheriff's office, the prosecutor, the fair board, and he recognized that that land was at one time going to be utilized for expansion for a justice center. And so there was a purpose in that, only designating that for parking only, because he knew that that could be reversed and they could no longer park there because they would there's going to be a building there in that at some time in the future. We don't know when, but in some of the future. So some of the question is this same board doing that same kind of collaboration between the fair board and the sheriff and the prosecutor and the courts? Because that's I know the answer, but I'd like you to answer that as commissioners, because there doesn't seem like a purpose like they had in 2014. There was a direct purpose. It's just designating that for parking, and now you're kind of opening up this whole new discussion on, well, what are we going to use it for? I see now that you purposely want to use it for RV park. We had this discussion last year, 2 years ago. There was going to be a skating rink. There was a purpose in securing that for just parking, but it doesn't appear in this resolution. There's not that collaboration between the other elected officials. There's never been any discussion. So could you answer that question?
Mr. Chairman, could I read the resolution? Because the resolution was actually crafted by Mr. Wilson, and it provides that, because there is a timeline with this, and if the timeline isn't met, the following piece, depending on how this goes, there is a request for an extension. But now, therefore, be it resolved by the Bonner County Board of Commissioners that the MOU in question is hereby dissolved, and the property in question shall not be limited to parking for the fairgrounds, may be used for any other legal purpose. So I believe any other legal...
That doesn't answer my question.
Well,
my question has there been any collaboration with the other elected officials on the goals and plans on using that for something else? Because that time in 2014, it was always designated for expansion for the Justice Center, and those commissioners at that time recognized that, and they did not want to tie that up. Their resolution didn't say we will give that portion of property permanently for the fair and they can do whatever they want. They purposely said it was only for designated strictly and exclusively. Exclusively means only for parking. Now what you're doing is you're kind of opening this Pandora's box. It can be used for anything. So if something happens, if the board decides that they don't want to build a RV park there, is there going to be another project coming up in the future that the other elected officials aren't going to have a discussion with, and is that going to be used for some other project? That's an honest
I'll address
question.
that. Yeah, none of this has ever been done in secret. You just never did like the conversation. So you've been in on all the conversations. You just didn't like the answers. You've been in the facilities over at the fairgrounds. Which one of them are really up to date and just state of the art? Not a one of them. You want to pay for it out of your budget? I know the Treasury doesn't want to pay out of their budget. Mike Rosedale don't want to pay out of his budget. The courts certainly don't have the budget to do it. So, and the county doesn't have the budget to do it. So what's the source of income that you recommend, Daryl? My ears are forward.
For what, sir?
To get all them buildings repaired. Where are we going to get the money?
Well, that would be the responsibility at the recommendation of the fair board. I'm the
Bingo.
elected sheriff, and my purpose, at least until I leave office, is to make sure that we have a site available for an expansion of the Justice Center. I mean, we've seen.
And you do.
You know, so that's my question, and what kind of work has been done. So I guess I'm sure that the fair board will figure that out and they're make that right decision.
Right.
But that still doesn't answer my question. There has been, I've talked to Lewis and I've talked to the clerk, and there's been no communications on what your plans are. We've showed up on the meetings and actions have been taken without our input. I can say that's happened, but.
So in this particular case, what happened was that the county commissioners met and they made their own memorandum of understanding, and I'll give it as a disclaimer because it was not a legal document. They did not consult with Bill Wilson, and so Bill sent an email to the board saying that that's not the way you would do that if you want to change that, and that's how this particular resolution came. It was not a consultation with the other elected officials, essentially. It was if you want to disentangle from the MOU, this was the way you were supposed to have done it.
And Lewis actually made the recommendation on how to change this and make it correct. And that was discussed with Lewis between me and him immediately after we did the MOU. And I said, I don't know that was the right way. I said, how hard is that to fix? He said, it's very simple. So yeah, it's nothing that was hid in the dark, nothing behind the scenes, no secret meetings.
No, to be clear though,
So-
that's not that. So I'm not talking about what was in the document. I'm talking about the creation of the document. So there was no discussion with Lewis of, is this a good idea? Because this has never been a good idea. It was, you guys have made your decision. This is the process that you would have had to actually go through. That is what I'm commenting on. I'm not going to say that, because in that meeting, I said repeatedly, I get that the two of you are going to make the decision, but you're calling this a memorandum of understanding, and that is not the correct way to do it. And then this came about after.
And one question then, Commissioner Bradshaw, in your conversation with Lewis, was there a conversation? Did you ever ask him, do you think this is a good idea that we designate this for the campground? Was that ever a question?
No,
Okay.
because that's not his wheelhouse.
that
I don't
proves
ask
my
him,
point.
I don't
There
ask
was
him,
no discussion.
you know,
It
he
was
doesn't
just-
come and ask me how he should prosecute a case. You don't come and ask me how you should investigate a case. Carissa doesn't come and ask me how she should do the taxes.
Well, when there's an
Mike
issue-
Rosedale doesn't ask me how I think he should do the elections. We all have our job. This is within our
Mr. Chairman,
wheelhouse,
there's an
and this
issue
is
on
our job.
Public property that has an interest of all of the other elected officials, there should be a conversation.
And it has been. You just didn't ever like the answers.
Well, I was not involved in those conversations.
Yes,
The
you were.
actions were taken, and then I've had to
You've
react.
been at
to
every-
that action.
You've been at
Thank
every
you very much. It's obvious
proposal
you don't
on
want to
this.
answer my question.
I did answer your question.
Wayne Martin for the record.